have you ever collected data on that? Say how much time engineers spend on whatever, scrubbing bombs and reading data sheets, and or maybe from your clients that gathered some data that said it saved us this percentage of time?
We definitely do. We do it mostly on the manufacturers versus the engineers, to be honest, because, quoting and procurement we're seeing there. But yeah, we're seeing, the average PO that is being sent out, the average team is spending anywhere from 6 to 10 hours a week monitoring that purchase order with manual time. We're cutting that down to about 5 to 7 minutes a week.
Wow.
We're seeing, and absolutely crazy. And same with quoting and bill of materials. We were seeing people take anywhere, depending on obviously the complexity and the size, up to 2 weeks to quote it if they're waiting on certain fabricated parts. And similarly, we brought that down to anywhere typically under 30 minutes to do, even if there are custom parts on there worth of work. So those are some huge time savers that we're seeing, in addition to obviously saving on component costs, which is a huge value to our platform, anywhere from, call it 3 to 5% plus for our average customer. So really trying to save time and money for all our customers who are out there.
Hi everyone, it's Judy Warner. Welcome back to this week's Ecosystem Podcast. Today I'm joined by Zach Feuerstein, who is the CEO and founder of Breadboard. Breadboard is an electronic supply chain solutions company that is using software, LLMs, and AI to absolutely transform the way that you can procure, quote, and find substitutions. That is absolutely taking the industry by storm. Make sure you go check out the show notes. I put some links there for you below so you can go check it out yourself, including taking your own bomb over there and having them run through it in a live demo. It sounds fascinating, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Now let's jump into our conversation with Zach. Hi, Zach. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm delighted to have you as our guest and excited to talk to you a little bit about Breadboard today.
Yeah, nice to see you as well.
Well, it was very fun meeting your team last week at PCB West, and I thought our audience would love to hear about the very interesting things you're doing with AI and LLMs. So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and what led you to start Breadboard?
Sure, yeah. So my name's Zach. I traditionally have always been involved in electrical engineering and computer engineering. My father is also an electrical and computer engineer, so I grew up all around it, whether it be our TV breaking or something in our house, always to maybe my mom's chagrin, right? We were responsible for fixing it instead of just buying a new one. Got my education in the space, but realized when I was thinking about my first job that hardware is really hard, as probably all your viewers know way better than I do. And software was very enticing at the time, and decided to start actually my first company in the software space as a senior in college. Started that company and really, started with some successes and some failures, a bunch of companies, with the most recent one working a lot with medical device companies, actually. So got to see hardware again. And then during the supply chain crisis a few years ago, my fridge broke, and I wanted to fix it based on all the lessons, my father had taught me of fix things, don't just buy new ones. And when I went to source the motherboard for it, they told me anywhere from 6 months to 3 years to get it. And I was like, something is going wrong here.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy, and we should definitely fix what's happening there, and been working on the electronic supply chain ever since.
So tell us exactly what problems you're trying to solve with Breadboard, and how does it work?
Yeah, so Breadboard is an electronic supply chain platform that empowers engineers and manufacturers to quote, purchase, and track every part they need to build the products that they're working on, right? And what we've done is we've simplified the traditionally manual and fragmented process of, electronic sourcing and manufacturing. And the way our system does that is it integrates with real-time data from all the different manufacturers, distributors, and different players in the space on every component you need. So covering technical specs to compliance to availability like stock and pricing, and integrates that to give you a very, very simple place where you can upload your requirements for what you're trying to build and go all the way from those requirements to actually getting those parts delivered to your facility in a simplified and automated fashion. So that's kind of what we do. And really that process helps you not only with the manual side of all the hours you're spending and days getting that data and, processing it, but also reduces the risk so that in the cases where parts are not available, how are you going to find a secondary source for it, and making sure that there are no delays, right, in your design to manufacturing process.
So does it give you that forecasting information like end of life on parts that you can bake that in, or how does that work?
Yeah, so not only does it provide you that data, so for example, part life cycle, like whether a part is obsolete already, or maybe that it's going obsolete and not recommended for new design. But what we also do is recommend parts that could be a good replacement. So instead of, your sourcing team having to go back to the engineers and say, hey, we can't find this part, you're going to have to redesign it, right? They can at least come with suggestions, right? And we'll provide those form, fit, function alternates for, the different parties who are looking to procure these components so that they have an alternative solution instead of just raising their hands of the problem.
So that's kind of at least with some of the other companies that are trying to take a stab at the same idea, that seems like a differentiator. Is that for your solution, having that kind of proactivity?
Yeah, I think that's one big piece of it, right, is making sure not only do we give you the data, but we give you a solution to that problem that's there. But also, right, what we've noticed in this space and really where we've doubled down on, and I think a lot of, people are seeing is the complexity, right, of all this data that's going back and forth. So whether it be, the distributors or suppliers responding in data in weird formats, or it being that your bill of materials that you're working on has, lots of alternates in different fields. Really where we specialize is taking that unstructured data and putting it into a structured format so that you can not only get those suggestions that we were just talking about, but also take action on it to make sure that you can move forward instead of spending that time cleaning up all that data by hand, which unfortunately we see lots of people still doing in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was at PCB West last year, and again, I've been around for a very long time and been to that show, I don't know, probably 20 times, lots of times. It was so remarkable. What stood out to me is how much people are talking about AI and LLMs and how that's going to affect the space, and how many different opinions or people are coming at it from a different angle. And I know that's a technology you use. So when you talk about gathering and structuring that data, how are you using maybe LLMs, AI, and some of the newer technology to put that into a structured, usable way and create an intelligent solution for design engineers who are our audience here?
Yeah, so that's one technology that's being used but I think more importantly, it's how does that entire stack work together, right? You wouldn't want to just throw your bill of materials or your Gerber file at ChatGPT and say, hey, good luck, like, tell me what I need to do on it. It's not trained for that. It's not ready to deal with it. Really what we've built is that workflow that first takes a document from any format. That document could be a bill of materials. Maybe it's also an RFQ response, or maybe it's an email, right, that says about a change order, right, that's happening about a specific PO, and translate that into a structured format that an LLM or something like that can understand, that then it can recommend actions based on. So for example, if you have a drawing, right, of a wire cable harness or something like that, how do you extract first the BOM off that? Then how do you start asking questions about that bill of materials to it? And then from there, how does that translate into data that can be actioned up on into our system? So really the thought behind it is there's a lot of data that's happening in, maybe not the simplest of formats, like, for example, that email where it has a change order. How are we using that to suggest an action that can be taken upon in our system? So, for example, you submit a purchase order. You say, hey, I'm buying this part for 81 cents. The supplier responds to you and says, hey, actually, I can't get it for 81 cents, but I can get it for 93 cents. Do you still want this part? In the traditional sense, you would have had to go into your email, find that email, realize what the supplier is saying, go into your ERP system, get that data, put that back into your ERP system, reissue a new purchase order, and then have that new version. Versus in our system, we read that email, we understand what that means, we generate that change for you, we issue that new PO, we track that version history, so that even when, on the financial side, you're trying to tie out that PO to an invoice, right, it's all there for you and just ready to go.
So it's able then to, you're talking about, which another company I talked to said, again, that they're able to, with permissions, of course, able to gather that data from emails. Are you actually connecting into your client's ERP, or like, how do you close that loop once you've gathered that data, structured it? Like, how do you get to that point? And
we're an automation layer on top of that ERP system. So whether it be us reading data out of it for inventory or historical pricing, or us writing data back to it for our POs and order statuses and everything like that, we're not going to be replacing that system. We're going to be sitting on top of it and then allowing you to update that without manual intervention. And we do that both on the ERP side, but also, to be honest, on the supplier and the distributor side, where if they support it, right, we're going to be issuing those POs through APIs and through transactions that way, so that there's not the manual work on their end to process all of it, which can cause delays as well.
Amazing. That's pretty interesting. So that's how you can do the end-to-end solution then, right? You're covering all those steps to the point of the PO, which is an interesting solution I haven't heard before.
For sure, yeah. It's whether it be the suppliers work with API or EDI, or if they just simply want it to be done over email, right? Our system can handle those levels of integrations.
Okay, well, let's go back to those differentiators. What are, you've seen them too. There's lots of different people coming at this from various different angles, trying to solve a similar problem in maybe a different way. So what makes Breadboard unique? And then let's just start there. And then I got a secondary follow-up question.
For sure. Yeah. So I think there are different people that purchase different ways. Our belief is that while people want to automate this process, make it easier, reduce the risk, they need to do it in a process, one that they're familiar with, and with the existing suppliers that they're already working with. And really, that's where we want to make sure that we can support. So when you're issuing those POs, right, you're not issuing those to Breadboard. You're still issuing those directly to your same suppliers. You're dealing with the financing side that way. If you have different facilities that have different requirements in terms of where things are shipping and to who, and maybe even have different like rates of attrition, right, of extra components that you need to order, our system allows you to configure all of that on the fly. So while you're maintaining your existing processes and configurations, which can be quite complex, right, in electronics manufacturing, you can automate on top of that instead of replacing that with some, other solution, and then having to rely on that sole partner. It's more of adding that automation layer on top of your existing processes.
And is the CM sort of in this workflow?
Yeah, so we both see CMs and OEMs as our customers. We see more complexity, to be honest, on the CMs, and we have over 50% of our clients are these CMs who are dealing with 20, 30, 50, 100 clients, which all have their own configurations and settings. So it's really whoever is buying the components. We see both some OEMs are buying their own components and then either manufacturing it themselves or consigning it to the contract manufacturers. And then a lot of contract manufacturers who are doing turnkey work, who are responsible for purchasing those components and are using our platform to do so.
So, Zach, how long has Breadboard been around, and what kind of feedback are you getting from both CMs and OEMs?
Yeah, so in terms of Breadboard, we've been around just over 2 years now. We launched our platform about a year and a half ago, and we're getting great reception. I think, initially there are people who are always, a little hesitant, rightfully so, with bringing on new software. They want to make sure that one is it's actually going to be able to do what it says it can, but even more importantly, that it's working with their existing team and not just replacing them. But, once typically we're showing people the software, explaining what it can do and how much of an improvement it can make in their job so that they're doing those value add activities like supplier relationships and managing those and working on, improving their structures instead of doing the manual work. People absolutely love it, and we're getting great reception there. And we're just constantly trying to improve our offering. When we started the platform, we were purely working on quoting. Now we do purchasing and supply chain monitoring, and we're thinking about lots of other ways that we can improve and make the process a lot easier from, all the way from design through, delivering that product to the customer at the end of the day.
Pretty great. So about how many active customers do you have now on your platform?
Yeah, so we have over 60 customers that are using our platform every day, ranging from, smaller startups on the electronics manufacturing side to, top contract manufacturers in the world who are, doing hundreds of millions or billions of dollars worth of transactions.
Well, that says a lot because, as you said, that's a really complex, because they're handling so many customers. That, to me, gives some weight to what you're doing. Okay, now I want to play devil's advocate, if you let me.
Yeah, of course.
So some of my peers that have been in the industry for a long time that are either do PCB layout, hardware engineering, and I know you've heard it many times, is they're all like, this will never work. It's too nuanced. If you don't want to read data sheets, then you shouldn't be a design engineer, And so what's your response to that kind of thing? And I get what they're saying. At the same time, I have to say, honestly, I think I'm standing in the camp of you, Zach, and all these young entrepreneurs that, grew up, coding in elementary school and figuring out software. I think you will disrupt it, but it is a very complex problem. So what do you say to people who kind of assert that kind of voice in the industry?
I think there's a lot of truth to it, right? I think there's computers are really, really good at taking a very highly defined problem and running through that if it has all those requirements there. What it's not really good at, even with the greatest technologies in the world, making judgment calls. Humans are really, really, really intuitive and really smart at making judgment calls that a computer, which at the end of the day is just taking inputs and making outputs from it, is not as good at, right? At making those inferences. It's getting better, right? Don't get me wrong, but it's not quite there yet. And really what we think is what you get perfection out of, or as close to possible, call it asymptoting towards perfection, is the blend between humans and technology, right? So yes, people will say, hey, you need to read the data sheet, but do you need to read that by hand, right? Like, probably not. The same way, right, you wouldn't say you need to grab the textbook off the shelf to read that physical data sheet and now it's in a PDF. You wouldn't ever question that. Well, are there tools that can help you search through that data sheet better than a Control F, right, to get you that result?
Right.
Yeah, there are. And really, at the end of the day, you want that person saying, yes, this is what I want, right, and approving or denying it. But can we get them that information to make that decision a lot faster so that they can spend their time making those judgment calls instead of doing the manual work to get the data to make that judgment call? So I think there's a lot of truth to it. We're never going to, and we don't want to, get humans completely out of the process. I don't think that would be a good thing. But how can we let them do things that are interesting problems to work on, take their brain power to do it, instead of spending 80% of the time on the boring and manual work and only 10-20% on the time that the projects they actually want to work on, and flip that around.
Have you ever collected data on that? Say how much time engineers spend on whatever, scrubbing bombs and reading data sheets, and or maybe from your clients that gathered some data that said it saved us this percentage of time?
We definitely do. We do it mostly on the manufacturers versus the engineers, to be honest, because, quoting and procurement we're seeing there. But yeah, we're seeing, the average PO that is being sent out, the average team is spending anywhere from 6 to 10 hours a week monitoring that purchase order with manual time. We're cutting that down to about 5 to 7 minutes a week.
Wow.
We're seeing, and absolutely crazy. And same with like quoting and bill of materials. We were seeing people take anywhere, depending on obviously the complexity and the size, up to 2 weeks to quote it if they're waiting on certain like fabricated parts. And similarly, we brought that down to anywhere typically under 30 minutes to do, even if there are custom parts on there worth of work. So those are some huge time savers that we're seeing, in addition to obviously saving on component costs, which is a huge value to our platform, anywhere from, call it 3 to 5% plus for our average customer. So really trying to save time and money for all our customers who are out there.
I did not expect you to say that. I expected a game, but not that big. That is unbelievable almost. And I've worked, I don't know, when we first met, Zach, I told you that I work for Mil Aero High Reliability EMS out of the DC area. And the people that I had to deal with to get those quotes done and parts and scrubbing bombs and doing all that, I was overwhelmed. I didn't know, and I, as a salesperson, had to wait weeks to get that stuff back, and it was expected. So even though you're saying you don't have that data for engineers, I would think they'd be very motivated if all this activity is happening at their CM, that they're going to get their product back a lot faster.
A lot faster, a lot more reliably, cheaper, right? And they don't have to worry about all that back and forth that they're typically going back. I can't find this part, or this part's going to take way longer, or maybe you misspelled something by accident, or put on like a part number. You gave only a supplier part number, or where the CM only had the manufacturer part number. Like, we just deal with all that, so that, that process, you don't have to think about it. It's like buying a part on, toilet paper off of Amazon, right? Electronics should be that easy. And that's what we're striving to do.
That's amazing. I can't tell you how many times I personally hit the dash number on your bomb, and having to do that back and forth, or it's like, oh, this thing, and just pick a capacitor. It's like, no. So I can really relate to that, and that's phenomenal. Well, where can people go learn more about Breadboard? I'm sure on your website, but is there a place they can see you in person, or on your website, or a webinar, or a demo? Where can people go check it out and learn more, Zach?
Yeah, I would recommend everybody go to breadboard.com. From there, you can learn a little bit about us. You can also schedule a demo. I'd highly recommend seeing it live for yourself. You can even bring your own bill of materials or bills of materials and see what it would look like with your data. And we've seen, even through demos, sometimes people realize how much money they're wasting on their product, and they're being overcharged by 10, 20, 30% or more sometimes. And just help you with a quick win there, even if you don't work with us long term. So highly recommend, just check us out at breadboard.com, reach out to get a demo, and we'd be happy to show you what we can do.
I love that idea of running their own bomb, right? Because where the rubber meets the road, right?
Exactly.
In the real life world. So what a great idea. Well, Zach, I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing with our audience all the very cool things you're doing. And really, you and several others, I'm confident you're going to disrupt this industry, but in the most positive way, so engineers can spend more time making the judgment calls and doing the creative stuff that they became an engineer for. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. It was great talking to you.
Great talking to you. For our listeners, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. Be sure and go down to the show notes and get those links. I'll get them all from Zach and put them for you. And hey, go get a demo with your own BOM and see how that looks. I'd be interested in your feedback if you do go do that. So please let me know. And remember to like, subscribe, and come join. We have a new website up. So come on and join our community over there at thedoubleecosystem.com. We'll see you next week. Until then, remember to always stay connected to the ecosystem.